doctors. How you doing? Sorry, I'm a bit late today. Actually, a bit late, earlier than I actually scheduled. Um, this is going to be a more abridged um, office hours this Friday. I was away last week in Melbourne, so I'm aware that we haven't done this one for a couple of weeks. But unfortunately, I've got something urgent to get to just before 11. So hopefully some of you managed to find me on YouTube, LinkedIn, and or Facebook. Um, so again, this is an opportunity to engage with me, ask questions about the medical careers process in Australia. I'm going to do what I normally do, which is go through a few questions that you've sent me through on YouTube, maybe provide a bit of education about some of the common questions and pain points that I often do get from you guys around the medical careers process here in Australia. But yeah, for those who've joined me live, feel free to ask a question in the chat and I will endeavour to help you out the best I can. Um, so I'm just making sure I can see if there's any questions on uh, coming through on LinkedIn. Trying to find my post here for that one. Hmm. It should be going through to LinkedIn. It's definitely going through to. Well, it says it's going through to LinkedIn. Presumably it'll pop up at a certain point. Actually, I think I know where I should be looking. Yep, yep, I found it. So, all right, might not be going live till the 10:30. So, let's have a look at what questions you might have while people might be sort of pouring in. So get a share screen here. Community. Screen. Oh, we want a window. Yeah, this window. Okay. Things working a little bit differently today. So hmm, it's not popping up, is it? If I do this screen. Interesting. Okay, screen sharing is not allowed. Settings. Got to set my settings for screen share here. Chrome. All right, I might have to leave you guys and come back. Okay, let's see if we can try this again. Hey, that's working now. Okay. So let's go to our community here. That's not what I wanted though. I wanted share a window. Window array. That's actually a little bit more complicated than it used to be. They've changed the settings in Restream. Let's see if we've got any questions. The chat. Nothing coming through as yet. So let's have a look at what questions we have. Then I thought I might, if we have time, quickly talk about the difference between the medical board and the Australian Medical Council, because that's a question that sometimes throws people. So Rathat Khan, a regular viewer from your channel. Oh yeah, compliments, love compliments. That is very kind of you. Thanks. And sorry for the very reply. So, question on the competent authority pathway question, but about the standard pathway. I have heard, this is from BT Spavadumfway. I've heard that if you don't have experience, you can give the AMC Part 1. So we don't say give in Australia. That's, I think, kind of an Indian way of saying things, or probably from other Asian countries. You can sit the AMC, that's the test or the exam, and get the license through. So this is not true. So this is not correct. Okay. You can sit for the AMC Part 1 after you complete your medical degree. but this does not lead to registration on its own. Okay. You still need to obtain a job, and it is unlikely that you will be able to receive a job offer without experience. And this gets into questions about, can I apply for internship? And there are plenty of videos on my channel about why, if you're an international medical graduate, the internship system is really pretty much off limits to you. So the short answer to this question is you do need some experience alongside the AMC Part 1 before you might be successful in getting a job offer. And then only after you get the job offer can you apply for your license. Question around the specialist pathway process. While the process is happening, is the applicant expected to be in Australia? That's actually one of the that's an actually fairly easy to answer question compared to most. No, you don't. Bad typing today. Need to be in Australia. I often joke that the most questions are actually more complicated to answer than you think. That one's actually fairly straightforward. Look up the top here. Hi, doctor. I'm a GP with 14 years experience. What's my chance to catch a job if I finish AMC 1? It's really impossible to say with only limited information. If you are a GP elsewhere, you may not even need to be doing the AMC Part 1 because you might be eligible for the specialist pathway. In general, there is high demand for GPs here in Australia. Okay. This is one of those situations where, if you want to dig in further, I would recommend one of my strategy calls and we can go over your personal situation. Right. Going to put a link to the strategy call in that answer. Looking for my shortcuts to upload. I can just do this. Yep. I've passed my PLAB. That's the equivalent of the AMC in the UK, for those that don't know. About a year ago, and I've recently started my first job as an F1 in the UK. You mentioned internship is anything above F1 level. So will my experience as an F1 be accepted in Australia? Oh, it's another. Yes, it will. Another easy to answer question. So feel free to ask a question if you do have one. I can see there's a couple of people online that might have a question that they want to run by me. Perhaps what we could do just now is just pop up the medical board website and the AMC website. So this is obviously particularly for international doctors who are thinking about coming to work here in Australia. There are two main institutions that you need to be aware of in terms of medical practice here in Australia. Those are the Medical Board of Australia and the Australian Medical Council. Now, I think a number of doctors from other countries I find get confused about these two bodies, which are separate bodies. They are national bodies. Um, Partly, I think, because there is something in the UK called the General Medical Council of the United Kingdom, which sounds very much like the Australian Medical Council in Australia. However, unlike the GMC in the United Kingdom, the Australian Medical Council actually has different functions. Um, so the General Medical Council in the UK is the registration or licensing authority. The Australian Medical Council is not the registration or licensing authority. So it becomes quite confusing because you need to know about both of these institutions because they are requirements for practicing in Australia, but they have different functions. Generally, for all international doctors, your first port of contact is actually going to be with the Australian Medical Council because you can see here that one of the functions of the Australian Medical Council is to verify any doctor from another country coming into Australia. So all doctors, regardless of which pathway they're intending to proceed via in Australia, start off with the Australian Medical Council. And this is where it sometimes gets confusing because basically you have to follow your eligibility check pathway here, which involves firstly checking whether your medical school is deemed eligible. And you can see here there's a little tool where you can select your country and then look up your medical school. Essentially, any medical school listed on the World Directory of Medical Schools will normally be approved by the Australian Medical Council. If it's a new school and hasn't quite made its way through, you can send in an inquiry. You'll see here they've actually removed 5 Chinese medical schools recently. 99% of doctors who contact me, their medical school is listed there. So you have to check your medical school is approved, and then you set up what's called an AMC candidate and account and portfolio. And this is you registering to the Australian Medical Council, and then they will send you off to the ECFMG if you haven't done this step already to get your primary degree, and if you've got postgraduate degrees as well or qualifications verified. And so the AMC is the authority in Australia that verifies all your qualifications basically. And so the medical board and the specialty colleges rely on the AMC for that function. They don't directly check with the ECFMG, they check with the AMC. So the information you get delivered through the ECFMG sits in your AMC portfolio account, and colleges and medical boards can check it with the AMC. Now, this is where it can be a confusing step because once you get the notification back from the ECFMG and the AMC will send you a notice saying we've received all the information, the next thing that will happen is that you will be invited to sit for the AMC Part 1 examination. And I've been told by some doctors this is confusing because other than if you're going on the standard pathway, you do not need to seat the AMC examination. So basically, other than for the standard pathway, once your qualifications are verified by the AMC, that's all you ever need to do with the Australian Medical Council. The Australian Medical Council does a number of other functions for other institutions in Australia and New Zealand. It accredits all the medical schools in Australia and New Zealand, interestingly. It accredits most of the specialty colleges across Australia and New Zealand because most of the colleges are binational. The one specific to New Zealand, it doesn't accredit. That's done by the Medical Council of New Zealand. And it also now accredits all the pre-vocational training providers in Australia. That's the ones that look after internship and the year after, which is normally called residency. So it has other functions. But for most international doctors, the main point of the main way you come into contact with the AMC is about this step about getting your qualifications verified. And then if you're doing the standard pathway, you've also then do the AMC Part 1 and possibly Part 2 exams. That's why I say it's often the first one that it is the first one that you usually engage with. The medical board, on the other hand, is usually the last port of call. other than maybe getting a visa in terms of, institutions in Australia that you deal with. So generally speaking, with most pathways, you have to go through the AMC initial process, all the other steps for whatever might be the specialist pathway, the competent authority pathway, which usually includes gaining a job offer from an employer before you finally go to the medical board and apply for registration. So the medical board tends to be the last step. That is up until recently. We can see here if we go to registration and international medical graduates, we used to have 4 pathways, we now have 5. And there is a self-assessment tool here that I haven't tried out, so we might do that in another video just to see how good it is. But essentially, we've got 5 pathways. The competent authority pathway, which is the one for IMGs who are non-specialists or specialists from the competent authority pathway countries, UK, Ireland, Canada, US. The standard pathway for other IMGs without specialist qualifications, and then the 2 specialist pathway, the specialist pathway and the short-term training and medical specialty pathway, which is for specialists or specialists in training. And with all those 4 pathways, the medical board registration is the last step after you get a job offer. The expedited pathway, which is the new pathway that's only been around for less than 12 months, it's different. You actually can apply for registration first before gaining a job offer. So that's a slight difference to the way it works. So what I used to say to people, which is that it's always the AMC, then the job, then the registration in that order, is now not absolutely correct. So the medical board is the registration authority. So you have to register annually with the medical board in Australia. You have to comply with all their requirements, which includes complying with their continuing professional development requirements. That is a whole nother story. So we might dedicate a video to that at a later date. I do have some videos on my channel about CPD. And there are other sort of mandatory requirements when you register every year. And it is the body that deals with underperformance or situations where doctors have been deviating from good professional standards as well. So it can suspend or withdraw your registration. It can require you to undertake remediation and a variety of things if you're in that category as well. So that's the difference between the AMC and the Medical Board of Australia. So we might just see if there's any questions there. If you've got a question about the process in Australia, please feel free to put it in the chat on YouTube or Facebook. In the meantime, we might just answer a few more questions from the YouTube channel. Just refresh this so I've got an up-to-date list. Apologies again if you've been waiting for an answer. As I've explained, had this plan to do these as a live thing, and just getting around to it now, trying to work through the backlog. Okay, Rizangus, consultant pediatrician in Nepal. Want to apply for neuropediatrics fellowship. Can you guide me? Yes. If you are still seeking guidance, I would recommend Strategy Call. You're probably looking at the short-term specialist pathway. A fellowship in neuropediatrics is fairly niche, so there may not be that many opportunities available. Hi. I'm a 2021 graduate from some country. Can I work in Australia without my home country registration? Or is it mandatory to have an internship and registration from my home country? If here some students do work without registration. Yeah. So, I mean, this is a bit of a complex question. Um, the medical board does need for you to have met the internship requirement in your own country. So it depends on what that is. Some countries you don't get registration until you're at a certain level as a doctor, and that's understood. It's probably going to make things a little bit difficult for you if you haven't got your registration. Um, Having registration in your own country is likely to make the process easier for you. Question about best doctor salaries in Australia. So that video is from data from 2 years ago. The ranks don't tend to change very much. The salaries go up a reasonable amount every year. Um, so the question is, are the salaries still the same, or what about IMG still have any hope to? Yeah, I'm not. I'm not really clear on what your question is here. These are general salary rates and not about whether you are an IMG or local graduate. Um, Sour grapes. Sour grapes 22443. Hi, I finished my training in anesthesiology in Russia. 2 years after 6 years of general training. Can I apply for the 24-month training program in Australia first, then the specialist registration, or straight to the specialist registration? So again, this is kind of a complex, long answer. Um, 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 to discuss. In general, the postgraduate training in Russia is insufficient to apply for specialist pathway assessment here. The short-term option is also likely to be difficult for you. So what I mean here is that in my experience with people who've done specialty training in Russia is it's usually a 2-year program. In Australia, specialty training ranges from 4 years is the minimum for some general practice training. Most other training is 5 or 6 or even more years. So the length is a real problem, and typically Russian specialists are not successful with specialist pathway applications. Similarly, that amount of training may not be seen as enough by the College of Anaesthetists to do additional training here. You may well be able to get some additional training here, but you will probably not be able to add that into your training in Russia and then apply to the college here in Australia, because they won't see that totally as sufficient either. The anaesthetic college has some specific requirements around the length of your formal training program, depending on whether you're from a comparable country or a non-comparable country. Comparable being a bigger list than competent based on the New Zealand list. Russia is not on the list of comparable countries. So the amount of formal training you need to have had is 48 months. I don't think you'll be able to add the two lots of 12 months in Russia with 2 lots of 12 in Australia, because they may say that that was not, whilst they may approve it as training, they may not approve it as a formal training program. So I think the answer there is probably not, but feel free to book a call with me and we can maybe go through what your options might be and why. So, and again, if you have a question on the chat, feel free to pop it in the chat on YouTube or Facebook. So we've got a question here from Dr. Ibrahim. Can an IMG doctor with 1 year of experience find a job in Australia after passing the AMC exam? So the answer here is, Ibrahim, yes, this is possible. But I generally find you will be more successful if you have 2 or 3 years of experience. If you think about it, you essentially got 1 year of experience. Sorry, now I've realized to stuff that up. I should reply. Let's do that again. Yes, this is possible, but I generally find you will be more successful. You have 2 or 3 years of experience. And the reason there is, if you think about it, if you've only got 1 year of experience, you're essentially as experienced as a resident might be here in Australia going into their second year after internship. And that's not necessarily seen as equivalent, because it depends which country you're coming from. Which is what, and you will be competing against other doctors from similar countries to you, who will have more experience. So I have seen it happen before, but generally a little bit more experience tends to go more favorable for you. There is an opposite end where if you have a lot of experience, it can go against you. But employers are not permitted legally to discriminate basis of age, of experience, or maturity, or anything like that here. But that discrimination still happens in the sense that often if you're, say, like a specialist in a certain area and you're now applying through the standard pathway, you may be perceived as having developed so far down your own path that it will be difficult for you to become a general doctor and fit within a team at a more junior level. So yeah, 2 or 3 years is probably better is the answer, but it also depends on what you're working in. It's definitely worth trying to get some experience in, like, let's say you're from India, for example, experience in areas like emergency critical care, psychiatry, general medicine are often good areas to have experience in, because they are often the positions that they are looking to fill vacant RMO resident posts with as well. So it will partly depend on what experience you've had as well. So good question. All right. Well, again, if you've got any other questions, please put them in the chat. I'll probably have to log off in about 5 more minutes. So we might just deal with the question at the top there. I'm just going to refresh again. It looks like I've got my backlog down to 4 months ago again. I've got a question for Liu. A couple of questions here. Let's see if we can tie them together. I'm a radiologist who'd like to move to New South Wales, but unfortunately I'm US trained. Yeah, so I can't really officially comment on options. Not really. Can't officially comment on options for visas. you should speak to a registered migration agent lawyer. Being US trained should be a reasonable advantage. There is no expired pathway for radiology at this point, so it is possible that the College of Radiologists might recommend the US qualification. Let's see. At the moment, so far, the colleges have only recommended UK and Irish qualifications. So I guess reading between the lines, that might be the outcome for radiology. But if your question is about visas, I do have a post on my blog about migrating, and it was written by a registered migration agent, James Palmer. And if you click on the link in the blog, do that. You can contact James, and there's a process there for asking some questions about migration issues as well. Yeah, look, so in relation to this question, I have no real insight into what the decision for radiology will be, other than to say that traditionally RANZCR has assessed most specialists, including from US and UK, as only partially comparable. About 95% of all applications for a specialist pathway with the College of Radiology are assessed as comparable, and about 94% of them are seen as partially comparable. So there seems to be a high hurdle to be seen as substantially comparable with the College of Radiology. So I have no idea how they're going to resolve this issue. Probably whatever's determined will be actually including a group of doctors who previously would have been seen as partially comparable. All right, so good questions, and thanks for joining me today. Unfortunately, I will have to leave a bit early today. I might get my editor to put up that video about the difference between the medical board and the AMC as a separate video, and I hope to join you again next Friday. Bye for now.